Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is a very special one. His name is Mason Harris, the Hutzpah guy. He's an author and speaker. And of course, his last book is the Hutzpah Advantage. Mason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It is truly a pleasure to be here. And I love the international aspect of your audience.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. And also, your book is endorsed by a previous guest. His name is Vern Arnish, the founder of EO and also the CEO of the Scaling Up organization. And today we'll have kind of a different format. We will try to be much more flexible because we want to leverage all the content and amazing stories that you have put it together with your Hutzpah Advantage book. Namely, we will learn a bit more about the acronym behind the term and all the behaviors that leaders of companies that want to keep scaling and growing might benefit from it, and I'm sure they will. But before talking too much about that, I'd love you to introduce yourself and let the audience get to know you better.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Again, my name is Mason Harris. I'm an author, a keynote speaker, and I work with some companies in terms of helping to create a culture of chutzpah in their organization. So I'm sure some people in the audience are thinking, did I hear that correctly? Chutzpah? I'm not quite familiar with that. Well, chutzpah is actually a word with a Yiddish origin. And it is, or at least I found in my research, that one doesn't have to know Yiddish or be Jewish to be familiar with the word, because it has permeated cultures, language all around the world. And when I say the word, if you aren't completely familiar with it, that's fine. Most people have difficulty defining it. When I think of chutzpah and the definitions that I obtained from my interviews, they're across the board. One of the key things in the research, though, is chutzpah has both negative and positive connotations, which makes sense to me because chutzpah is actually, as I see it, a skill set, a set of behaviors and personality characteristics that enable one to exceed what would be considered average by a very wide margin. Mm-hmm. And it can be used for good or for bad. So, for example, if you and I were to sit and decide, we want to get into software programming. This isn't the level of our audience yet, but it's an important clarification. We both take a course in writing code. And you leave that course and you decide you're going to create algorithms for healthcare or business applications, or even personal software to enhance people's enjoyment of life. I, however, take a different approach. I decide I'm going to create ransomware. It's the same skill set that allows both of us to write this code, but I choose to use it for bad purposes to benefit only me without any regard for the people that are hurt by it. So again, like any skill set, chutzpah can be used for good or for bad.
That's really awesome, and that's definitely sometimes a difficult word to pronunciate depending on where we are coming from. But I think I'm doing a good job pronunciating it so far. Thank you, Mason, for helping me out with that. And I really like also the bolder component of this kind of attitude, right? So the kind of people that are able to go through the good and challenging things that happen in life and bring some chutzpah into the equation to get stronger and to succeed. And we all know that in every single entrepreneurial journey, and especially in entrepreneurs that are trying to double and triple their revenues every single year, there are very stressful moments where you might be considered the best of the best, and one quarter later, you might be considered the worst of the worst. so that's definitely a good point. So we always discuss on the show 3 critical ingredients to scale a company. Number 1, radical focus. Number 2, world-class leadership. And number 3, we have been iterating on this one, but we have been at the culture of execution. And because culture is also included in the number 2, world-class leadership, we have finally iterated it to the execution machine, and it's much more related with the rituals and the rhythms. But today I would like to, as I said in the beginning of the show, I would like to make it a little bit more flexible and really double down, as we like to say in the industry, in the Hutzpah acronym, and learn from the different key behaviors that you have blended together in the term. So could you give us a little bit more of an overview about the Hutzpah meaning?
Absolutely. But I also would like to add, you're 100% correct in terms of the becoming bigger, making bolder moves, doing better, which is an objective for all of us sitting here. Now, the Chutzpah advantage is a promise both to individuals, so say employees within an organization, but also from a leadership perspective. And I know that every one of our listeners has Chutzpah. They may not be able to define it yet, but they have elements, they have these behaviors in place. Otherwise, they would not be leading organizations that are trying to grow 2, 3, 5, 10 times where they are over a set period of time. So there's an element of encouraging and creating a culture of chutzpah in an organization, which helps one achieve those multiples of growth. As far as the acronym, what I tried to do to make this more memorable and easier to implement, and I'm going to try and keep our examples for the most part at the leadership level, but there will be some examples that come in at the personal level so that we can see how it still relates, so that it's appropriate both for those in our company who are implementing the ideas, who are critical to the development of our company's, our organization's success, as well as the leadership that's separating itself from the others. So
that's great.
Each of the letters of chutzpah stands for a different behavior or characteristic. So the C, when we think about people and even organizations that get stuck, take actually Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, identifies organizations that are all at roughly the same level of success, tracks them and follows what happened to them over time. How did they go from being good organizations to great organizations? And what are some of the characteristics that made that difference? Well, a key one related to the C is the expression carpe diem, which isn't as familiar here in the States, but I'm sure in Europe, the education and then the multiple languages that you all speak, carpe diem is seize the day, or really seize the day. In some cases, people refer to it as seize the moment. From a corporate standpoint, that works on several levels. We haven't evolved. We're still in the midst of this COVID pandemic. Things are changing. Some organizations have done a considerably better job of adapting and pivoting from where they were. Undoubtedly, COVID impacted virtually all of us. Yet, for example, I was speaking with somebody from a dance studio of all places. And dance studios are frequently franchises. And once COVID hit, the dance studios were closed. And what this specific dance studio did was they recreated all they were doing with the lessons, reached out to their clients, and did things online. They were able to do personal lessons virtually, encourage people along, watch as they dance, provide the music. That's an example of pivoting. In the business we're in, the coaching business, we mentioned Vern earlier. Vern had already started integrating virtual presentations in his live meetings, but he had to go from live, completely being shut down, to completely virtual. And he made that change better than anybody I saw in the industry. And I do a lot of work in the events industry because I'm a public speaker. And so many of them froze. They were dependent. They waited for things to happen. So carpe diem, that first behavior says we are going to change what we're doing. We are going now. We can't wait for the future to give us more clues because we may not be around if we don't make the move quickly. Seize the day. The opportunity is here. Pivot when we have to. That's carpe diem. That's the first behavior.
I love it. That's really a good one, and kind of connects very well with the, I would say, even with the execution machine, right? So when there is some ambiguity or some stress, it is always good to get back to our rituals, to our framework. It doesn't mean that we will kind of think in the same way, but something will give us a solid stability to think about new ways of dealing with the problem that comes. So I'm thinking about the execution machine as about, even if we are in the pandemic or not in a pandemic, if we can meet in person or not in person, let's do our dailies, our weeklies, our monthlies, our quarterlies, and let's come up with solutions for the issues that come up on those tools. So we might be facing change, but at the same time, we still feel some familiarity with the rituals that we run them in the same way. So, and the H.
Sure. The H, and actually I like the example you gave in terms of maintaining what's familiar while knowing we have to adapt. So we may not have been able to do those morning meetings in person, but we could do it virtually. It's not the way we want, but it's better than just saying, let's just send each other emails when we need to keep each other updated. That ability to see our colleagues, to listen to ideas and react immediately, that was critical. So that was Absolutely. A differentiator. The H stands for something we are always familiar with. There's not any idea, good or bad, that doesn't generate objections. So the H is about learning to handle objections. So if we're thinking about product or development, we want to introduce a new service in our fintech company. The idea pops up. If everybody is going, oh yeah, that's a good idea, let's proceed, I'm a bit hesitant. That's kind of scary. There should be some objections as to, whoa, have we thought this through? Even people who support it should be saying, what's the flip side of that? What are we missing? Create those discussions, but then learn how to handle those objections as well so that we can truly understand what we need to do moving forward. From a customer standpoint, we've all been in front of clients who tell us, no, I really don't think I need that service or product that you're offering. Well, if we're good at handling objections, we don't say, well, thank you. Can we follow up with you in a couple of weeks? Which the inexperienced business development or salesperson does. Instead, we say, I understand what you're saying. And that's actually a valid point. But can I ask you, when you say that you don't need it right now, I know from our discussion that you're having a difficulty in this area. What is that costing you, as an example? So handling objections is about learning, one, what the true objection is, and two, it gives you the clues as to now how to build the value, how to create value in what you're doing. Because I know through my years of sales, training sales teams, training the people in my own companies, how to handle objections and how to close a sale. There are a lot of things that we think are important to the sale, but the most critical is creating value. And you can't create value until you start handling objections, because you don't know what each customer values, and every customer values something different about your product or service.
And what the CEO faces the most is definitely objections by all the stakeholders, the investors, the team, the customers, the providers, the partners. So it's definitely very important to understand first, to be understood after. So and then find the link that will help us to win together. So definitely a great one. And you.
Sure. The U is about understanding, and this partially comes from handling the objections, partially comes because as business people, our minds sometimes think a bit outside the box. So I'll give you an example here. I'm sure a couple of us on this call have probably heard of Uber. Okay, so we all know that Uber, in essence, when they first started using their technology, created a system that enabled transportation for many people. But they were getting turned down by PE firm after PE firm who didn't understand what it is they were doing. Why is that? Because they interpreted the market as already being fully saturated. What was so different about transportation? We have taxis, we have limousines, we have private car services, we have public transportations, buses or subways or electric cars that travel for commuters. We have even separate buses. And if you were in the San Francisco area, you could see these organizations popping up, not doing a full public run, but rather a handful of pickups and delivering at a handful of places. So there was no lack of transportation. And people were rejecting Uber for that reason. They even hired, one PE company I read about, hired an expert to say, what's the real value of this opportunity? They believe they're going to be a $1 billion company. Of course, Uber is worth considerably more, and at its peak was worth way more than $1 billion. But they believe it's a $1 billion opportunity. What do you think? Well, this professor, again, the expert, took the approach that, well, the taxi and limousine industry is estimated at only $1.5 to $2 billion right now. Do I think that they're suddenly going to end up with 2/3 to half to 2/3 of that industry? I don't see it. And what that expert missed wasn't about the existing market. It was about where could we take this market? How does it grow? Are there customers that are not using existing forms of transportation because it doesn't solve their needs? In the case of Uber, and for me, for people I know, for so many of us, it was about the knowledge, the familiarity, and the comfort of knowing I don't have to drive and look for parking. I don't have to try and find a cab late at night in an area that I'm not familiar with. I can even go and have a couple of drinks with my friends to celebrate our latest client without worrying about being irresponsible and driving home. That was a big piece of the market that they never got. So the U stands for uncovering need, pain, and opportunity. And I separate need, pain, and opportunity for a couple of reasons. People have a sense for what they might need. For example, everybody loves the medical example or the dental example. I know I need to go in for maintenance. I need to get my teeth cleaned twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, and I need the x-rays every year or every 2 years. But I'm too busy to schedule that right now. Well, what happens? That need becomes an urgent pain when suddenly it's like, oh, my tooth is killing me. I have to get in, and I'll take something, and within half a day, it's miserable. You can't focus, you can't concentrate. So we all move quickly about getting pain resolved. Some of us are a bit smarter about helping people realize that need that they expressed, although seem unwilling to resolve right now, actually is going to become a pain. And then the last piece is opportunity. Opportunity arises like Uber, saying, there's clearly a need. People recognize that as good as taxis and public transportation systems are, they're not there necessarily when you need them. Systems close down at night, the buses or subway systems don't run in Washington, D.C. after a certain point. When does it become a pain? When I am stuck and it's 1 a.m. and the concert just ended, or the sporting event just ended, and there are a line of people waiting to get taxis. And this is where the taxi line is. So that becomes the pain. The opportunity is what Uber created. They said, there's an opportunity to do something different, ride sharing. And forget all the great business advantages they were able to put together. We don't have the investment in vehicles or drivers because they're all owned by somebody else. We have the technology that enables it. I was doing some work with an executive recruiting firm a couple of years ago and helping out in the sales team. And I went out with one of their more experienced sales reps. And it was a medical technology company that was in need of a senior executive. And the position had been over for 6 months. And I observed the sales call. I was introduced, of course, and for the most part, kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my sales call. I wanted to see how this experienced rep was doing. And he was speaking about the benefits and how the company he represented, they're great at finding people. They have a 95% success rate and that they'd love to work with them. And this went on a solid half an hour. And I could see it wasn't going where I would have liked it to go if it was my company. And the rep was finishing up by saying, well, this is great. Would it be okay if I follow up with you in another 2 to 4 weeks? Because I know you're looking at other companies. And of course, the person said, sure, follow up. I don't know anybody who says, oh, no, don't ever reach out to me again. I don't want to speak to you. It doesn't happen very often. So,
good one.
Right, exactly. Before getting up, I said, excuse me, can I ask a question here? And I asked the client, who was the CEO of the company, I said, position's been open how long? He said, about 6 months. I said, so who's been managing the people on that team? He says, oh, we have somebody else who's another executive who's sharing his time, splitting his time. And I said, so the people on the team with the open position, are they really getting managed as effectively as they should? And he responded, well, I'd like to think they are, but realistically, probably not. I said, okay, that's a fair answer. Thank you. And what about the people on his team? Now that his responsibilities are split, what's happening to his team? Are they getting managed as effectively? He said, probably not. And then I said, have you lost anybody on that other team? He said, actually, we have lost 2 people recently, lower level, but we're in the process of filling those. I said, great. Could you put a dollar value on what it's costing you by not having leadership in both those roles? And he thought, and he came up with a good number. It was a significant number. And I said, well, you've been looking for 6 months, haven't made a decision. If you postpone this decision another month, just so you know, whoever you bring on board, you're not going to have anybody probably in the roles you want for another 6 months. It takes that long for the level you want to find the right people. What will that cost you? He goes, my God, I've already got this in place and now I have this. He said, I hadn't thought of it that way. I said, okay, so I just wanted to make sure we understood that the cost of delaying. And again, on behalf of, I mentioned the firm, we really appreciate being here and we'll be back to you sooner than 2 weeks. And that's how we left it. Well, 2 days later, he called the rep and awarded them the search. It was a very good client. The search, the executive they were looking for was in the mid $300,000 range. So a nice commission for the company and for the rep. And it happened because when you help clients understand that need they recognize is really a pain, and there's an opportunity for them to solve that pain, you can close the deal more quickly.
That's definitely a good one. And we have kind of 8 letters in the Hutzpah words. So we have covered 3 of them: C, carpe diem; H, handling objections; and U, uncovering need, pain, and opportunity. So let's move into the T.
Okay. A good segue, thank you. T is about, again, what every one of the leaders listening to the call are at some level. And by that I mean they're not afraid of failure, or at least minor failures along the way. They're not afraid of people that, in essence, sometimes we call them now, I love the expression, oh, the hater is out there. The ones that are always critical, they're like, you're doing a lousy job. Look, you messed up on this thing, and it was a slight hiccup as opposed to a true mess up. They're out there. So T stands for trailblazers. And trailblazers are those leaders who understand that people will be criticizing them. They have to learn to ignore it. And they also have to learn to accept some level of failure, because we're never perfect. We never make every decision correctly. So trailblazers, you don't have to be the person that introduces something so dramatically new. Maybe you're in an industry that's established and you're going to try something different. I mentioned Vern's conferences previously.
Yep.
In essence, he became a trailblazer because conditions required that companies either decide to stay put and hope to remain viable during this pandemic without even knowing how long it would last, or they pivot to something new. Vern, in a matter of 60 days, his last live conference was canceled, speakers were hired, and suddenly he had a virtual conference up. And by the way, I think we both know that the attendance grew dramatically from the live to the virtual. So even though the pricing was less, the revenue model wasn't impacted. If anything, Vern grew through this period. Trailblazers, let's look at Elon Musk for a second, because his name comes up frequently when I speak about Hutzpah. We think about electric vehicles. Well, he didn't invent electric vehicles. He was not the Thomas Edison of his day. He was an entrepreneur who, if I remember correctly, wrote and sold his first code. It was a software game, when he was a teenager for $500. And he had experience founding and building companies in different areas. And he saw the future of electric vehicles, was on the board of Tesla. He didn't found Tesla, but realized that this opportunity was too big to ignore. So he became a significant shareholder and the chairman of the board. And now he's most closely associated with Tesla, more so than anybody else. But it doesn't stop there. As a trailblazer, he created the Boring Company, whose projects are going to enable a different means of travel, cut through wasted time, traveling overland or by air, by building tunnels. And the tunnels will support other types of community development. There's more that the Boring Company is doing. And now SpaceX. And what was it, about a week to 10 days ago, having the first full civilian flight, civilian astronauts that were out there. That's what trailblazers do on that highest level. By the way, I also consider Elon Musk to be in a category that I call Chutzpah on steroids. Most of us on this call, we practice a form of win-win chutzpah. We create companies. We develop leadership talent under us to implement our ideas, because we want our client base, our shareholders, our employees, all of our stakeholders, and ourselves, we want to do well. We want to win. And the only way we do that is by providing a winning solution for others. So that would be win-win chutzpah versus chutzpah on steroids. There are actually 6 different types of chutzpah that I've identified and discussed in the book. But that'll be another call perhaps.
Definitely. And we still have 4 letters to close the word, so we would need to speed up. So the Next is the Z, right?
Z. Fortunately, we can speed up. I grew up in New York City, so I can speak quick. You may not understand me, but I can do that.
Keeping the content, but speeding up.
Right. That's right. We have to accelerate a little bit right now. Z is about what happens to us when we hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. We spoke earlier about handling objections. This is a different type of objection. This is a no, not interested, that will never work, no, forget it. So Uber was an example of, and we all face these types of roadblocks, significant barriers to our success. The Z stands for zigzag. And by zigzag, I mean there is a barrier. There is a banker. There is a VC firm. There's a private equity firm that says, quite honestly, I looked at your proposal and I don't believe this is going to provide the results we're looking for. Thank you. And you get told this time after time after time after time. What do? You find alternate sources of financing, you continue searching, and eventually you get what you need. You overcome that obstacle. You go over it, you go under it, you go around the sides. But that obstacle, that banker, if it's a financing issue, is not going to stop where you go. Think of how many people we know, particularly in the small business side, they get rejected by their bank, which is the most common source for financing for small businesses. And the first bank and the second bank, and the third bank says, no, we can't do it. You don't have a way to guarantee it or be there in case this fails. We can't work with you. We're not risk takers. Okay. Right. So what do? Maybe they source on the internet. Maybe they do a fundraise. Those people are practicing the zigzag. They're saying, traditional banking, no, that's it. I'm going around them. I'm going to the internet. And there's also the 3 F's of fundraising, which is family, friends, and fools. I'm going to raise my money from them. Private equity, venture capital, they all have a lot of decisions to make in front of them. Frequently, we're not the decision that they make. Do we give up? Do we persevere? Zigzag is about perseverance. It's about persistence. It's about, I'm going to find a way to turn this no into a yes from somebody else. Okay, the P. Right. Hopefully we got through that one more quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
There is something that drives us all. As individuals, I sometimes see it referred to as our North Star as individuals. What is it that guides us when we're in really tough times? On a corporate leadership level, again, let's use this COVID pandemic. I can imagine, again, we've all suffered at some level. Some industries happen to be in the right place at the right time. If you had founded Zoom as you did X number of years ago, a decade plus ago, and now people were interested, it wasn't a matter of 2 or 3 or 10 times X. It was a matter of 500 times X in terms of the interest you had. You were at the right place at the right time. But for a lot of us, what helps us get through those roughest times? When, say you own a chain of restaurants, and restaurants were hurt very, very badly. So many jurisdictions would not allow them to open up. What kept these restaurant owners going, be it a single location restaurant or a chain restaurant? A tremendous amount went under. They closed their doors. Well, the P for me stands for purpose. And actually, I get this, there's a book, Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl, who was actually a Holocaust survivor. He survived Auschwitz, one of the most notorious of the many concentration camps during World War II. And he made observations about people who survived and who didn't survive with him. He says there are 2 critical elements. Let's identify them. One is luck. If you have the bad luck to have been selected by a guard for the gas chamber, there's nothing you could do. I don't care how emotionally healthy or physically healthy you are. It was over. Bad luck happens to all of us. Being in a concentration camp is bad luck. But he says the other side is for those people who survive, he could tell or had a sense of who was going to continue surviving, assuming the bad luck didn't interfere, versus who was going to perish. And he says that came down to purpose. If they had a purpose that was beyond the camp, in his case, he said, my purpose to survive was to reunite with my wife, to have that family that we had spoken about. Sadly, his wife perished while he survived, but that purpose helped get him through. And the biggest thing I learned from his book is that we can't control the events around us. We can't control how people treat us or mistreat us in a lot of situations. We can't control the competition, but we certainly can control how we respond to all the challenges that face us. We can throw up our hands, we can whine, we can say, poor, poor me, or we can say, that's terrible, but how do I turn this into a winning situation? That's where I think our audience excels. We have a purpose that goes beyond a mission statement in a company. And if we can convey our purpose, and the purpose, there are personal purposes and there are organizational or business. It could be our purpose is to leave a legacy. That means create that product, that service, that company that extends beyond us. And we need our colleagues, our employees to help get us there, creating this culture that includes purpose in it. That's not a mission statement. We're going to do our best to provide service. Well, whether or not that's true, we're going to be responsive to customers, whether or not that's true. I'm talking about something deeper than that. And that's what the P is in Hutzpah.
That's awesome. So, and I will also create a challenge to the audience, which is to look for the other two letters and find out the meaning of those. So we have covered 6 of the 8. So repeating, the C stands for carpe diem, the H for handling objections, the U for uncovering needs, pain, and opportunity. The Uber example also helps with the U. The T for trailblazers or trailblazing, the Z for zigzag, and the P for purpose. The ones that will need to come for another show with Mason, for you to read the book, it's A for, that stands for ambiguity, and H for humility. Mason, would you like to add anything else before we wrap up that you consider would be critical from your experience with Hutzpah?
I would basically just try and sum it up as these 8 behaviors and characteristics are not unique to us in the business world or anybody who's interested in self-improvement. Hopefully the stories, the examples I give, enable people to see them differently and make this Chutzpah model, the acronym, makes it more memorable for all of us to implement in our companies, in the company's culture, and in our lives. I thank you and I thank your audience for paying attention. It's a pleasure. I'm available, obviously, for people reaching out. I love learning new stories of chutzpah and success. That's what makes up my book and will make up future books and podcasts. So I welcome questions and inquiries.
Thank you. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask you our favorite question, which is, if you'd have the opportunity to meet the younger Mason, let's say 10 years ago, what advice would you offer to your younger self? Or you can just pick a moment in your life.
Well, aside from showering more frequently as a younger person, but I'll put that aside, I would say that don't fear failure. Don't let your life, to the younger Mason, be guided by your peers, by trying to fit in. There's nothing great about fitting in all the time. Yes, we want our relationships, but by standing out, by stretching boundaries, social, creative boundaries, company boundaries, by thinking in terms of, okay, this is what everybody's doing. How do we go all the way to the end and just beyond? I would have enjoyed my youth a lot more if I wasn't as worried about fitting in. It's when I discovered the Hutzpah side, that stretch the boundaries, be different, that I realized this is a lot more fun. It's a lot more creative, and I can see the results of my work. I can see how productive I now am. And I didn't see that when I was younger.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time and the amazing job that you are doing with your content and your book. And it was really a pleasure to host you on the show.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to your team as well.
Thank you. And as you saw, we had a different show. Hope your energy is completely up and ready for the day, the evening, whatever is the moment that you are listening to this podcast. We have focused a lot on the world-class leadership component of the 3 principles for scaling up. And as always, we try to make your life easier, and we keep bringing you the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. See you soon and keep scaling.